Hi, everybody. It's Joe Cioffi here on this Monday night, and I hope you had a great day. A new week has started, and we had some beautiful weather here in my neck of the woods across the eastern Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Long Island, Connecticut, Hudson Valley, southeastern New York. Just beautiful blue skies and sunshine. It was a great day all the way around. Another day with hardly a cloud in the sky. And we're going to take a look tonight at what the long-range weather pattern looks like for us as we go into the next couple of weeks. Because I think what we're going to see is a sort of a work in progress, very gradual change in the upper air pattern across the U.S. This big ridge in the east is going to break down, but it's not going to completely disappear. It's actually going to just weaken and then flatten out over the next week or so. But it is going to start allowing troughs out of Canada to start swinging through every few days. But it's going to be a process. We're going to take a slow stair-step process. It might finally mean perhaps the first widespread rain here late next week, this coming weekend and early next week, for parts of the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast, which have been quite dry over the last month or so. So that'll be a welcome change. And that's going to tie into whatever we see that develops in the area from the southwestern Bahamas to Florida to the northwestern Caribbean, eastern Gulf of Mexico. Somewhere in there, we're going to see low pressure develop late this week. Now, whether it becomes a tropical depression or a tropical storm remains to be seen. But I think some of that moisture may eventually find its way northeastward up the East Coast. So that'll be an important thing. So we'll look at that. We'll look at the upper air, and we will see where this all takes us. Don't see any big storms, though. And as far as the tropics are concerned, other than whatever comes out of this area, it looks, at least for now, a bit quiet. And I don't think that's a huge surprise, considering that in the intense period that we just went through. So why don't we take a look at what the weather pattern has to hold for us, and then we'll come back afterward and we'll talk some more. So just stand by. We're going to take a look at the upper air pattern across the United States and North America over the next couple of weeks, because it looks like there is going to be a bit of a change in the profile that has been driving us for the last couple weeks with this trough that's been in the western states and the ridge of high pressure that has been in the east. And that high at least got interrupted by the trough that moved through this weekend and cooled it down after that round of heat that we had last week. But you can see that the overall look of the upper pattern, there's a lot going on with that ridge just kind of standing out. But this time around, the ridge is not going to last nearly as long. It isn't going to completely disappear, but it is going to flatten out and weaken somewhat. And the reason why is that we do have this vortex in Canada that's dropping down into Hudson Bay, and that is at least going to lower the jet further to the south. We've got some troughing at the end toward the end of the week over in the west, and of course we're going to continue to watch the possibility of low pressure developing somewhere in this region that I just circled, from the northwest Caribbean to the eastern Gulf to the Bahamas. Now, it may or may not become a tropical system. One of the signatures with systems that develop sometimes this time of year is they tend to be broad, so it may not get to a point where it'll be truly tropical, but it could be a big rain producer, and it might bring some much needed rain up to the northeast and mid-Atlantic states sometime late next weekend or early next week. Now, the upper high actually shifts eastward and orients itself northeast southwest as we move into early next week. At least from the standpoint of what the GFS has. You can see here it's off the Atlantic coast, and this jet is dropping southward little by little as these weather systems rotate around the main jet stream in Canada, with lower pressures aloft up in northern Hudson Bay, that probably as each trough goes by, you're going to see that jet get further and further south and the ridge get a little bit weaker, a little bit weaker. It's still going to be pretty stubborn there into the middle part of next week until the next trough swings on through, and you can see it here for the end of week number 2, actually the end of next week, so we're into the middle of the month now, into October, and then it looks like it tries to pop up again, only to have another strong trough swinging into the east toward the end of the period. So we're not going to be, making a huge change in the pattern, but it is going to be, a somewhat of a pattern change as things start to realign themselves as we get deeper into the fall. We're not going to get into any kind of wintertime pattern, obviously, this early on. Something like this, if this winds up verifying, and I don't know that it will be because, again, we're now into the end of the second week, and that's a pretty deep trough and a very strong ridge up in the west, and you've got a ridge out in the Atlantic. So, that does create a cold flow. So certainly we'll start to see these shots of cooler air coming down over time. Now, what this means is with regards to the day-to-day weather. Well, the first thing I want to look at is this possibility of something in the tropics in the subtropics anyway, for late this week and beyond. So you've got this big sphere of moisture that is going to be extending from the Caribbean on up into the Bahamas, Eastern Gulf of Mexico, Northwest Caribbean, right in there. And pressures here are going to be below normal. You'll notice where the high is. The highs are displaced pretty far to the north. So that's allowing for lower pressures. And sometimes you get these gyres, these wheels of moisture that come out of the deep tropics here this time of year. They are often signatures of systems that are big rain producers, and there is a bit of a surface low that the GFS does start to show in the Florida Straits here by Thursday. And it tries to do something with it, but it never really gets it going. And eventually all that tropical moisture starts to lift up northward and northeastward, which would make sense considering what it showed us when we looked at the upper air. And widening out, we'll go to the U.S. view here, and I'm going to have to start using that rain frozen map because that is going to start coming into play at some point. But you can see all this moisture that starts to move northeastward up the Appalachians on Sunday into Sunday night and Monday. So it might be the first widespread rain that the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic states sees in quite a long time. In the meantime, out in the West, as we back it up, we continue to see these weather systems that are going to be producing some occasional snows up in the Rockies, something a little more formidable in terms of rain with an east wind. If this is right, big high builds down into Nebraska, so you've got this east-northeast flow that develops some rain into the plain states and some snow into northeastern Colorado during the second week of the forecast period. And there's another cold front that manages to work its way into the east, and it moves on through. You get a shot of pretty chilly air, and then that goes out, and then another shot of chilly air comes in toward the end of the period. So at least from the standpoint, again, of looking at the pattern becoming more, let's call it autumnal, I think that's where we're going with this. So these big high, these big upper ridges in the east and a deep trough in the west is going to, rather than being locked in, it's going to change into something where we're going to see changes coming through from time to time. Now, I want to go back to that tropical view. Let me see if we can get the upper air winds here. There we go. So one of the things you need from the standpoint of tropical storm development is low wind, at least low wind shear, and it does. Let me get back. So we're going to get back to where we are now, and here we go. If you notice, as we go through Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and even beyond. There really is, there's pockets of low wind shear uh, in the Florida Straits, but you do have some stronger winds in the upper atmosphere, very much involved in the circulation of whatever develops there or in the northwestern Caribbean, which is what the European does. And that shear is going to be present for at least a while. It does lighten up somewhat, but it could be the reason why we are not really seeing ideal conditions here for tropical cyclone development. You don't really have an upper high. You actually have an upper low sitting in the southwestern Gulf of Mexico. So you might wind up with something that looks more non-tropical than tropical when we see the development here with whatever low that does form. So it's just going to be it's not going to be ideal conditions at all with regards to tropical storm development with all this wind shear that's going to be present in the upper atmosphere. So we'll see how it goes. But these things that do form this time of year, when they form like this, they tend to develop very slowly, and I don't see this becoming anything major. But it might be a big rain producer for somebody. So I think that's the way we're going to approach it at this point. So I'm going to stop the weather portion of this right now and come back to you guys. If you've got any questions, we will have at it. There we go. I want to just right off the bat, because PlayStation Boss mentioned that the 12Z GFS run had a snowstorm in its long range for the Midwest. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, we are going to go through this for the next 6 months or more. You can't look at the GFS in the long range just like the Canadian model. I used to say how the Canadian model spins up everything that moves in the summertime with hurricanes. You're going to see these models start to spin up snowstorms all over the place, and you can't get worked up over the stuff. You'll go crazy. Almost none of them come out to fruition the way they're indicated. Karina Rivera, thank you so much for hitting Super Chat tonight. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Very kind and generous of you. I appreciate it. So let's try to get a relaxed view now, where we're in October. So when we start to get into November and December, and you start to see printouts of snowstorm after snowstorm on model run after model run, that you don't get emotionally crazy, okay? Because this is what models do. And, of course, over time, there's more variations. As I've said, there's more variations in what the possibilities are. Troughs are deeper, they're stronger, they're less intense, they're not as deep. They're in one spot, then they're in another. So rather than drive yourself crazy, just try and get a flavor of the overall pattern, and then see what possibilities come out. Thank you again, Karina. No worries. Appreciate it. Let's see. Whether NLO 78, you keep asking about hurricanes. You don't want them. Trust me. After what we just saw, we really don't want them. So don't root for them, please. Yeah, Sean, I'm not ready for ice fishing yet. I haven't really tried it. I really would like to. I almost did. I tried to do it a few years ago when I went up to Lake Winnipesaukee when it was 15 below zero. And there was a 40-mile-an-hour wind at the same time, so the wind chill was just off the wall. I couldn't even stand outside for more than 10 minutes. It was just so bitter cold, and I decided I'm not doing that. We got a ways to go for the deep freeze. Anthony Orr, could you please keep us up to date with the weather for Saturday? Champagne Day, yes, in beautiful Belmont Park. And I think isn't the Flower Bowl also on Saturday? I didn't look at the card. For those of you who don't know, I'm also, very much enjoy horse racing. I've been following the sport since I was a kid, and I've seen a lot of the great horses run up close and in person over the years. So, and the Flower Bowl, which is for older fillies and mares on the turf, is one of my favorite races. And I don't know if Lady Eli is going to be in that race. Quick story about Lady Eli. Beautiful 3-year-old champion, winds up developing laminitis, which kills horses. It's an hoof infection. She was near death. They managed not only to save her, but they brought her back, and she's running every bit as good as she was before she got ill. And she's been winning Grade 1 race after Grade 1 race. So if you ever get a chance to watch, she'll probably maybe go to the Breeders' Cup. You got to see this horse run. First Frost and Freeze, Thomas. I'm going to take a guess. I'll take a guess. Sometime in early November, maybe early to mid-November. They've been coming late the last several years, or maybe this year will be a bit different. Sean, this is the best. Meteorology, fishing, and handicap, and thoroughbred racing. Yeah, I'm kind of a odd mix of things that I like, and they get my passion going. Hi to Noble Ramsey Elbay, and let me see. I just want to make sure I didn't miss anybody's questions. Raymond wants, Raymond, I think you're one day, Wednesday night into Thursday before that front comes through. But this ridge in the east is different from what we saw last week. So I don't know whether there are going to be that many record highs set. The one chance, at least, Thursday is going to be the one day for me where it might get into the 80s. But the front may be coming through you too soon. Saturday, Anthony, by the way, looks dry for here. There might be a shower past Saturday night, but I think it's going to be mainly dry. Let's see. Just want to make sure I got everybody asked some questions from before. Because I know at some point soon is going to be the first snowstorm, the first snowfall anyway. I think I got everybody. Yeah, just to go over that with respect to the system in the tropics, anywhere from the Southwest Bahamas down through the Florida Straits, the Eastern Gulf, and the Northwest Caribbean, they're not ideal conditions for development. So, plus the fact that you've got, the upper air is a bit of a mess. Not when you look at the atmosphere below 18,000 feet or so, it looks potent, but then when you start to look at the higher levels and you start to see all the wind shear that's around, it's a bit problematic. You might wind up getting a system that looks more subtropical or non-tropical in nature than tropical in itself. And whether NLO 78, there's still of course there's still a chance for another hurricane, that may or may not be an East Coast issue, but that. Right now, there's nothing going on in the Atlantic that would suggest that. The upper air pattern in the Atlantic is still pretty, the wind shear issues are still going to be there for a little while, at least a little while longer. The PlayStation boss wants chances of a full snowstorm in the Rockies in Nebraska. Well, I'm going to tell you, PlayStation boss, you'll probably see one there before we see one here. At least the troughs have been in the west. So, if that continues, or at least if the systems are swinging into the west, you probably will see, may see something before I do. Could a tropical system turn to a snowstorm during the winter when it gets further up north? Ryan, you don't really get tropical systems. Every once in a while, there are some that have come up in late October and early November, and then they transition over to non-tropical systems. As I remember, PlayStation Boss is right. I think in West Virginia in the mountains, they got some very heavy snows from Sandy when the low moved inland. So because it gradually becomes cold core, so that changes the whole profile of the atmosphere. So there also have been a couple that have produced some big snows in Maine, but again, they've already begin making that transition over into a non-tropical storm, so they're not truly, tropical animals at that point. Good evening to Howie Weisberg. Good to see you here. Okay, so now you want a big snowstorm in Norfolk. Yeah, you got to have the setup pretty perfect up and down in that part of the Mid-Atlantic states in order for you to get snow. But we'll see. The winter always look, every winter usually leads to at least one surprise, so don't bet against it. PS4 Gaming 02. I wish it would get cold at least once this year in Louisiana. As I remember my life in New Orleans, PS4, as soon as the temperature drops to 70 degrees, all the rich women would have their fur coats on walking around the downtown area in the French Quarter. So you just got to wait for your first round of 70-degree highs. Sunny Fournier, you keep getting all those big heavy rains. Yeah, that's terrible. Why was Sandy called a superstorm? I guess the media kind of gave it that label. I mean, because it went from being a Category 4 hurricane and then gradually transitioned over into this large, intense, non-tropical storm cyclone. So it got the moniker of being called a superstorm, and indeed it was. I mean, no question about that. Right. Tomorrow we'll have the long-range forecast discussion and the Belmont Lake Pick 4 analysis. Well, you know what? When the card goes up for Saturday, I'll take a look and I'll give you my ideas. I haven't been paying close attention. I don't really know the 2-year-olds that are coming up, but we'll see. Okay, we're getting all the blizzard and snowstorm questions. It's too early, folks. Too early. Okay. Why don't we wait until that? Wasn't Sandy compared to the perfect storm in 1991? Yeah, I think, well, that was different, though. That came in from the east, as I remember it. So the east-northeast. And I don't think you had pressures down to as low as Sandy was. I have to go back and look, though. It was the Halloween storm, as I remember it. I'll have to go back and review, because it's been a long time since I really looked at that. And yes, Awesome Gamer, nobody wants a white Christmas more than I do. Well, I shouldn't say that. I guess a lot of people do. But we'll see. We're going to have a lot of fun come as we get deeper. Oh, so the Flower Bowl's on Sunday. Okay. And Sunday I'm going fishing in Connecticut with two of my friends for trout and Atlantic salmon. So I will maybe try and do something from up there on Sunday. So let's, everybody wants the snow talk tonight. Oh boy. Cliff Newton, good evening to you too. Let's, there's nothing, we got to get it colder first. So we have to pay attention to, how the pattern starts to shape up as we get deeper into October and November. That might give us at least some clues as to where the first part of the winter is going. David Schwartz, I don't remember. I have to go back and look. I don't think it was considered a hurricane after the fact, but I could be wrong. I have to go back and look. It's been a long time since I really looked at that stuff. Did the National Weather Service get rid of the blizzard warning altogether? No, they got rid of the blizzard watch, and I think that was a good thing to do because it just got very confusing. They got rid of a few other watches and warnings, and it was just kind of ridiculous with some of the watches and warnings that they were putting up for certain weather phenomena. Basically, raindrop watch in effect. The blizzard watch is confusing because I think most people don't understand what a blizzard is. A blizzard is a measure that has to do more with visibility than it does actual snowfall. You could have an inch of snow and still have a blizzard if your visibility is 0 because of blowing snow. This is what happens up in parts of Alaska. This is what happens in parts of the upper Midwest sometimes, where you get these systems that they don't produce a lot of snow, maybe only a few inches, but they are accompanied by 50-mile-an-hour winds. And there used to be a temperature criteria that you had to have temperatures under 20 degrees. Well, they got rid of the temperature criteria, so they just basically made it where it had to snow heavily for a certain period of time. I always thought that they should go back to the old criteria, and a lot of this got brought up front and center in the big March snowstorm last year for the area near the coast where they had blizzard watches up, and it wound up changing to rain, and people kind of lost it. over that. So they're not going to do blizzard watches anymore. When blizzard conditions occur, they'll put up a blizzard warning, but they're not going to be putting up a blizzard watch. Okay, those are gone now. Anthony Orr, who points out, by the way, to the question earlier of the perfect storm being made a hurricane in post-analysis, the perfect storm absorbed a hurricane by the name of Grace. Okay, so it actually absorbed a tropical system into its circulation, and it did not in and of itself become tropical. And yeah, Raymond, the upstate got creamed by that storm back last March. The sunspot activity determine how much snow we get. There's a lot of theories about, active sunspot solar activity, inactive solar activity. I'm not a big follower of that. So, I don't know. I think as a snow lover, we kind of like to grasp at straws, anything that will point to a big snowstorm we'll grab onto it. Cynthia, has enough upwelling occurred in the mid-Atlantic to challenge the strength of any systems through the rest of the month? Well, one of the things about upwelling is that it's a temporary phenomena, and once the ocean settles down, the water temperatures will tend to come back up to close to what they were beforehand. I'll take a look at the water temperature map to see if that's happened. I can get actually. Am I able to do anything here? Let's see. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to see it based on some of the models that are available. There's no invest. I can't look at the hurricane model water temperature forecast, but I'll give it a look to see what's happened. Usually once storms leave and it takes about a week or so, the water normalizes. Hi to Stephen Franco, who's I'm sure waiting for the first snow of the season. And Jason Schaefer, as always, we live and die by the NAO, but the NAO being the North Atlantic Oscillation. One of the things I'd like to point out now, too, because we'll be talking about it during the wintertime when it comes to blocking, okay? Blocking in the upper atmosphere, which tends to force cold air into the eastern part of the United States and takes storm tracks far enough south where it's favorable for snow. I think it's overstated to a large degree. We've had a number of snowstorms in the absence of blocking. So you don't really have to have it. When you do have it, your odds go up, but it's not a necessary criteria in order to produce a heavy snow. And the Midwest is about to get some much needed rain, so it's been dry for the last 2 months. Yeah, it's just been, it's been really dry here for the last month. Excuse me. My day is catching up to me. I spent too much time in the fresh air fishing for smallmouth bass, which I was successful at, by the way, today. Dudley Forrest, thank you. Yeah, I need a coffee. I didn't have mine today. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. I'll save it for tomorrow morning. I usually have a cup in the afternoon, but today I didn't because I went out fishing mid-afternoon. I didn't get back till almost 8 o'clock. All right, folks, you know what? We're going to call it a night. We will be keeping an eye on things over the next several days. We'll see what that system in Florida does. Thanks to Corina and Dudley for hitting Super Chat tonight. I really appreciate it. By the way, if you'd like, I've got some mugs and T-shirts at the Joe Stradamus store. You can take a look at those. But by all means, don't feel obligated. But in case you're thinking now, because I walked into Walmart today and all the Christmas stuff was out. I was actually quite flipped out about it. But, if you want to get your favorite weather geek a Boxing Day Blizzard mug, or maybe if he's a fan of mine, you can, I got a mug of my salmon catch the other day. You can check out the stuff on the Joe Stradamus store. So everybody have a great night. We will see you tomorrow, and enjoy the rest of your evening and your Tuesday.